Here we go. We have a long one, not the long episode, a long book. So I'm picking out, like we talked about before, I'm going to pick out a few of the important points. Not going to go through the whole thing, but we will be reading it again, and probably again, because I actually really like Walter Isaacson as a biographer. So in this would actually, it's Elon Musk, a biography by Walter Isaacson, published 2023, just not long ago. We previously read the Ashley Vance biography. I read that one a couple of times, and we did an episode on that. But that one was temporarily limited because it only got up to a certain point in history. And many things have happened subsequent in Elon Musk's life. The biggest one, in the news at least, is the Twitter acquisition and its subsequent change to X. So as always, we will do a brief summary so you get some of the ideas that come out of it, and then we're going to do the contents of the book. We're going to do an analysis, talk about how good the book is, and then big picture to wrap it into a wider understanding of the world. So to begin, the summary. Wounds from childhood. This is actually a common theme throughout the whole book, is that there are a number of things, and likely this is significant for anybody, not just very important people like this particular one. But childhood, he had a couple of polls that seem to be still animating him to this day, related to his father, Elon Musk, and the way that he was and the way that he treated his children and their mother. And then also bullying, which there was an event in his childhood wherein he was bullied so severely that he still to this day suffers many of the ramifications of that. So one of the themes that goes throughout the book is talking about these psychological implications and how they affect the way that Elon Musk approaches problems and approaches his companies and approaches dealing with other employees and just other people in general. And so that's a through line throughout the whole book. And this is often manifested in his harsh and callous demeanor to other people, but in kind of a unique way. He has this inability to understand emotional states of others in the proper way, in the normal way that generally anybody can. But he doesn't hold a grudge against employees. There's this one incident that comes up wherein he absolutely undresses, just eviscerates this one employee who wasn't prepared because he was supposed to be he had previously lost somebody close to him. It was something along those lines. But anyway, so he gets absolutely eviscerated by Musk in this situation. And then the next time that they meet and they talk, there's just no hint whatsoever of the previous conflict. It's just go on from there and move on and do something else. So, of course, throughout the book, we go through all the companies and talk in detail, especially about Twitter, the Twitter acquisition, how that happened, who was involved, what he was trying to accomplish by doing it. And one of the things that you notice is there's kind of a lot of freestyling when it comes to the kinds of things that Musk decides to do. But all the companies are present. We go Zip2 and Twitter, which will become X, and X.com, which was the former idea for Zip2 and PayPal, and SpaceX, and the idea of going to Mars, Tesla, OpenAI, and what happened there. And then some of the stuff that I really enjoyed was how he functions, like the things that really animate him and guide him when it comes to managing these companies. And of course, it goes into much of his personal life related to his spouses, his various spouses, and his tryst with Amber Heard and the kinds of things that make women appealing to him. Whether it's Grimes or Amber Heard or his original spouse Justine or Tallulah Riley, and all the many kids that he has, all those things have really significant impact on his psychology, or at least elucidating how psychology functions. So that'll be just kind of a brief summary of what the book talks about and things you can imagine when it comes to a biography, but to go into the actual content itself, his childhood. So he had this adventurer grandfather, and the family kind of motto was live dangerously, carefully, which of course has built into it a curious contradiction, but it's something that seems to have animated Musk, and we'll see more of that later. But his father, Elon Musk, had a lot of problems, it seemed. And one way that the man himself described it, was that personal networks are more complex than digital ones. So Elon Musk, he could be very abusive. He was very smart. There was one discussion recounted by the author, by Walter Isaacson, where he talked about how Elon Musk discussed this idea to solve randomness and how important it would be if he did, but he's afraid to release it because of what impact it would have on anything related to randomness. And so he seems like this kind of combination of snake oil salesman and performance artist and just really damaged human being. He would have these wild swings in his personality when it comes to his anger and affection, and later would be described as adopting alt-right positions. Of course, that means nothing nowadays, but related to COVID and the Biden claims about Biden and the safety or lack thereof of vaccines. So this was quite the character, and this was somebody that Elon and Kimball lived with at some point by choice, because it was after what had happened between Elon Musk and May Musk. But Elon said that his father was lonely, and so he wanted to tend to him in some kind of psychological way, but it turned out to be a grave mistake, as he was very abusive psychologically and very harsh and was difficult to talk to, and would take them on these weird trips and things like that and just leave them alone. One time he just left them in this hotel and disappeared for a while and just left them a little bit of money, and they watched kung fu movies for extended periods of time. But in his relationship with May Musk, Errol was apparently unfaithful, and he would promise to change and then not do it. They would have these bitter fights. And notwithstanding all the horribleness around the relationship, May would become pregnant, and so she would try to stick around for at least a little while. And then Elon himself as a kid, he would get into these trances, and this is something that we saw in the Ashley Vance book, which was fascinating. He would get into these trances where he was trying to work out some kind of a complex problem, but he would not be accessible at those times. Now, you could see it in various psychological ways. It could be some kind of a defense mechanism, a method of retreating from the world, as opposed to something that has this, metaphysical or just physical quality that he actually can't respond. But it also could be he's just using all of his mental resources, which would make a lot of sense of what he's become since. He's using all of his mental resources to try to understand something, so he cuts out all the sensory inputs that could be interfering with that. One time, his teacher recounted an event wherein Elon was in one of these trances trying to think of something complex, and his teacher would ask him question after question, try to get him to respond, and then he would just respond, "The leaves are turning brown now." So there's some kind of a disconnect with that. And he also suffered severe bullying, especially one incident wherein he was attacked viciously by multiple people, and this had long-term physical ramifications on his body that he suffers from to this day. So you can see how there's this combination of being bullied by his father and being bullied by kids at school and having these trance-like states and all of these different things. You can see how that combination would be a motivating effect on him, lifelong. His spouses, we go into his spouses, like I said, I brought up a couple of them, but Justine was his first one. And she would end up, she was a writer, and she would end up writing a blog about it. Now, I think some of the anecdotes related to the wives were omitted in this biography that were kind of salacious in the other one. Things like Justine writing a blog about Elon, I can't remember if that's in there, and her demanding that he introduce her as a writer, and then him doing it in a dismissive way, like telling the people that he was introducing to, just saying that, "Oh, Justine wants me to tell you that she's a writer." So I'm not sure if that came in. There was information about his son, Nevada, who tragically passed away soon after birth, and how much that severely impacted him, and could have impacted his marriage, of course, but was very difficult for him to deal with. And I think the phrase that was used at the time was that he cried like a wolf, which is absolutely fascinating, that was the phrasing, cried like a wolf as opposed to something else. Now, obviously a wolf is seen as something that is predatory and capable and moves forward and hungry and all these kinds of things. So when you cry like that, it can be tears or it can be like howling. So there are other references. There's talk about Tallulah Riley and how their relationship went, and Grimes later on, and their children, and how Elon acts. And especially Riley, she was kind of plugged into the system, so she would push him to accept certain precepts, liberal precepts, and try to get him to follow those lines, but he would often resist that pressure. And then Amber Heard, there's a section about Amber Heard, and I think she was referenced as the Joker. There was something very unstable about her, and that was appealing to Musk. There was one event where she locked herself in a hotel room and was making all these accusations to people and wouldn't open the door. But she was this kind of chaos agent that made sense to Elon. Kimball described her as reminding him of Errol, of their father, another kind of chaos agent. And there's something that's appealing about that. He also had a child who is, I hate to say it like this, but a child who's trans and is a full communist and has rejected everything that his father stands for. So this must have had, of course, a big impact on Musk and the way that he approaches these kinds of issues. But it's something that, historically, it's not something that people would have had to deal with, especially people trying to build massive companies like this. So everything about his spouses and his home life, his childhood, and all of those things, you could see the chaos that's inherent in the situation. And you can see him later on, at least this is kind of one of the theses of the biography, you can see him pulling those things out later on. He wants that chaos aspect, and that could be something of the motivation for his maniacal approach to all these different businesses. So not just, online payments, but when it comes to space exploration and when it comes to building electric cars and all those things, there's this kind of strain of chaos that you can see in all those. So, of course, we go into Zip2, and there's talk about PayPal and what happens with X.com. He wanted to have an everything, especially payments, system that would manage everything that people do, but he ended up suffering a coup. Elon doesn't care about risk. He doesn't care how risky a venture is. If he wants to accomplish something, he will just accomplish that thing. Peter Thiel did, one of the major investors in PayPal. And so there was eventually a coup in PayPal, and then they went Thiel's way as opposed to Musk's way. And Musk to this day says that if he had stayed, then PayPal would be $1 trillion company. It was also during this time that he took his first and last week-long vacation, during which he caught malaria and was bedridden for a long time and severely injured from that. So he just doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't take those kinds of vacations. Mars becomes a huge tentpole, becomes a North Star in his efforts, and he builds SpaceX. In the A-Xii Vance, they talk about a lot of the stuff where he tried to go to Russians to buy a rocket and go through all the aspects of what makes a rocket and how to build one and just figure it out themselves and build it in the cheapest way possible and the best way possible. And one of the things that he does and he did with this business was that he starts with the mission, the thing that he wants to accomplish, and then he backfills the business from there. And he said of SpaceX that we must, or the idea of going to Mars, that we must have inspiring things in the world. And this idea, which I don't remember from the A-Xii Vance biography, but it might have been in there, is the idiot index. So this is how much more costly a product is over the cost of materials. So it's that fungible area where you can improve the costs and improve the production of something. And when it comes to rockets, it's an extremely high idiot index because of the way that they were funded at the time. So, for example, the Merlin engine, which was the first kind of engine, that's what they called it, for the SpaceX rockets, they found it really strange that there was this similar tech, but it was way more expensive to build something in a rocket than it was to build something in a car. And much of that was because of NASA requirements. So there are all these additional requirements, and the way that NASA was funding these, through other companies like Boeing, the way that they were funding these at the time was they used this cost-plus method. So what they would do is they would pay the costs of a company like Boeing, and then they would give them some kind of a profit on top of that. So what does that incentivize? That doesn't incentivize them to make incredible products or do the best they possibly can or make it as cheap and as efficient as possible. That incentivizes a company to just spend whatever the hell they want because they're going to get the cost anyway and take their profit because they're going to get a profit. If they had some kind of external pressures, then they'd be trying to build a better rocket. So Elon Musk takes a whole different tack. He says, no, this is private sector and we have to build something to work because that's what we're incentivized to do, is build something to work and do it as well as humanly possible. Because the whole point is to get to Mars. That's what we're trying to do. Whatever the money situation is or anything else, it's about getting to Mars. And there's this one incident related to SpaceX that I just love and so have to reiterate here. It was mentioned in the other biography, but we're going to talk about it here again, is the slosh baffles incident. So these are the kinds of things that you have to worry about when you're building a rocket, which is absolutely incredible, is that the amount of slosh that you have in the fuel cells or the fuel containers, the amount of slosh that you get in those is actually really important because if it sloshes just the wrong way, it can start vibrating and throw the whole thing off and the thing can explode on that basis. So it's the tiniest things that you have to worry about. How much sloshing is there going to be within the fuel? So they had to come up with, after, they're destroying these rockets, they have to come up with the reasons that these things happen and fix things like slosh baffles to ensure that the fuel isn't sloshing around in such a way that's going to throw the rocket off course. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Then Tesla. Tesla, of course, we know the origins of Tesla. We talked about that before, and how it was just a couple of guys who were trying to build a car, and Elon bought it. They already had the name Tesla, and they already had a car that they were trying to do, but Musk was the one. Musk was the one who said that we were going to make an expensive car first and then go to mass market, and which is exactly what they did. But it was Musk's idea to do that, to take it that direction. And the big technological advancement at the time was lithium-ion batteries, and so it was just taking that tech breakthrough and applying that at scale so that Tesla could be as successful as it is. And the Optimus robot, if people saw that, there was this unveiling of the Optimus robot at one point from Tesla that is supposed to be able to, it walks and it moves. It has a whole human-like quality. I think, and I'm just going to interject here, but I think people are overdoing I don't think we need to be so wedded to human-type movement. This is something that, Boston Dynamics is solving as well. It's trying to create something that is able to move like a human with a similar limb structure and everything. I don't know if we need to be so wedded to that. But anyway, whatever the case, they made this Optimus robot, and there are a lot of claims and efforts going on related to that and what it's going to be able to do and how smart it'll be and all those sorts of things. So we have, there's some discussion of OpenAI. I know we talked about that in our last book by Max Tegmark, Life 3.0. We talked about OpenAI and what happened with OpenAI and how Larry Page was one of these ultra optimists when it comes to AI from Google, Larry Page. But Elon Musk is a pessimist, as much as we can divide them on that binary. He's more of a pessimist and thinks that we have to be really careful about AI. And that's why they have most recently, and I just looked at the website, it's just a splash page. There's nothing to it yet, but a whole bunch of people involved. For A-Xii, which is going to try to responsibly understand what AI can do and its tagline is something about understanding the world. OpenAI, if people don't know what happened with that, was that Musk kind of founded and financed much of it in the beginning, but then it decided to go profit instead of stay nonprofit and open. It's decided to go profit with Microsoft, and because of the insane uptake that they had of users when it came to ChatGPT. So they took a whole bunch of money from Microsoft, and now it's being integrated into all sorts of things and being used by millions all over the world all the time. So we'll see what A-Xii has going forward. And here, yes, okay, this is one area. I love all the other areas too, but this is something that I got to really look into a little more closely and is something that could be applied just in general. You can't really go back and remake Tesla, but you can, from now on, apply the kinds of things that Elon Musk applies when he's thinking about how to do something or who to hire or whatever else. So the algorithm, this is what it was called in the book, the algorithm that Elon Musk applies to his businesses is question every requirement. So whatever the requirements are, whether they're legal, illegal, whatever's going on, question them. Question if they're necessary. And delete any part or process that you can. Whatever it is, if it's superfluous, try to figure it out and get rid of it. Simplify and optimize. So you want as simple as humanly possible and as optimized as humanly possible, every aspect of your business. Accelerate the cycle of time, or accelerate cycle time. So that's just speeding everything up as much as humanly possible, and then automate, so have it be able to do it on its own. When it came to Tesla especially, it wasn't so much a matter of figuring out the tech and the design and all those things. The biggest thing that they had to figure out was how to mass produce these cars, and now that's something that they've worked on tremendously and have figured out to the nth degree how to best do it. And then when it comes to hiring, this is another area, or employee management or something like that, not necessarily just hiring. But some of the things that he applies are that all tech managers must have experience in tech. So they must understand the tech if they're going to manage tech. It's not just going to be some generic HR person who's going to be doing it. Camaraderie is dangerous. This is another one that's kind of counterintuitive. You don't want people to in line with each other as opposed to in line with the goal or in line with the company. It's good to have people who are individuals who are doing the absolute best that they can because they want to do it for themselves. The worst thing that you can be is confident and wrong. So don't be confident and wrong. That was another one that he applies. Never ask someone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. Excellent principle, of course. If you're going to ask somebody to do it, you better be willing to do it yourself. Talk to the layer below. He didn't have a strict hierarchy and does not have a strict hierarchy when it comes to his companies. He's very willing to talk to people who are on the lower levels of the bureaucracy to try to get ideas or to figure out what's going on with them, to get a better sense of the way the company works. He is absolutely willing to do that. have a maniacal sense of urgency. So you always want to be doing everything all the time. Just always be getting stuff done day in, day out. That's how you function. Maniacal sense of urgency. Of course, that's not for everybody. Most people are not capable of working at that pace. But when he finds the right people to be able to do that, then it achieves incredible things. And the only rules are dictated by the laws of physics. That is fantastic. It's just physics, all these trappings of civilization that we put on things. It's really just a matter of physics, whether you can accomplish the thing you're trying to accomplish or not. And then another favorite topic of mine, the Cybertruck. I just have to talk about this a little bit, just because I love this thing. And one of the questions that Elon Musk asked when they were talking about a truck, they got these early designs that look just kind of basically like trucks that you see all over the road anyway. So they wanted to take it a different direction. His question at these meetings where he was seeing these designs that looked so similar to what was already there was, why doesn't the future look like the future? That was his big question. So some of the things they started looking at and taking inspiration from after that were things like the El Camino, the design of the El Camino, the Halo truck in the video game Halo. They have a very distinctive kind of truck there, and Blade Runner. So the kinds of vehicles that you see in Blade Runner. These were the things that were inspiring for the Cybertruck. And so that's why the design came out the way it did, which I hated at first. I thought it was a joke when it first came out, but now I absolutely love it. I think it's incredible. It's the first car I've ever fallen for. So, love the Cybertruck and how that came about. And talks about it in the book. So Twitter is kind of the big addition for this book, because none of this had happened by the time the previous biographies had come out. And a whole lot of stuff happened around Twitter and is still happening. So one of the benefits, it wasn't actually an initial aim when it came to buying Twitter, but one of the benefits he realized was that he could get the credit card information for payment processing using Twitter if they instituted this monthly fee. So they could get that payment processing information so they can more easily transition into a payment processor later on, and an online bank and all these other sorts of things. But they actually had a big issue with Apple, because Apple wouldn't release this information. You go through Apple's App Store, and that's how you get Twitter. Then Apple has all these rules for how the information can be used and who gets the information and how much it costs and how much of a chunk they're going to take. So this was a big deal, a big thing in between. And who was it? There was this one particular employee who was very controversial. He was a liberal, but he was kept on by Elon Musk after the acquisition. And Musk just told him, you go talk to Apple and tell them not to do that anymore. And the guy's like, what are you talking? I can't just call Apple and tell them to do something differently. That's not how any of this works. The Twitter files that eventually came out, and the alleged bias and against conservatives. And throughout all this part, the author himself, Walter Isaacson, is very skeptical. He sounds like you're, a basic liberal. He's very skeptical of all these kinds of claims, but goes through some of the details related to it. So one of the things that Musk said he was going to do when all this first Twitter acquisition stuff was happening, he said that he was going to make an offer and he would quintuple revenue by 2028 to $26 billion. And he was going to do that in a bunch of different ways. One of the major ways he was going to do that was to reduce reliance on advertisers from 90% of revenue to 45% of revenue. And so you can see these different kinds of paradigm shifts that you do with big companies like this. And one of the things with Twitter, I remember right around the acquisition, and this was fascinating, was we had all these videos of employees at Twitter who was showing like a day in the life of a Twitter employee. And they would show how much free stuff they get. And there were all these amenities and stuff they could use. And they'd have a couple of meetings, but otherwise don't have much to do. And they get this free food for lunch and then, go home early and all of these things. And it just looks like this luxurious life while Twitter was losing a whole bunch of money every year. And then he goes in and fires, I think it ended up being 75 or 80% of the employees. And there were all the Jeremiads at the time that it was going to collapse because there weren't going to be enough employees to take care of it. And it's, still up. And now it's X, but it's still up, still working, pretty much functioning at the same level or at a better level than it was before. So in addition to that, the Sam Bankman-Fried, you guys remember that person? That was the FTX guy who is under investigation currently, or has been charged with fraud for the defunct FTX exchange, crypto exchange. So he attempted to be involved in Twitter, and actually Grimes, Elon Musk's girlfriend, tried to get him more involved, said that he would be a very useful person to have involved in the acquisition of Twitter and the development of Twitter thereafter. But Musk says, and I'm sure this was the case, that when he met Bankman-Fried, that all these alarm bells went off, and he was just like, no, something's off about this guy, and so I don't want him involved at all. And of course, that was an incredible intuition, and it's a good thing that he had it. Then you have Matt Taibbi, who did the Twitter files. After that, he's a journalist, kind of an independent journalist, along with a couple of other independent journalists, got to do Twitter files. So what they did was Musk gave them access to a bunch of messages and internal documents related to Twitter that were there from before he acquired it. And he said, you can go through all these, figure out what's there, see if there's a story there, and let me know what's going on. And so they would go through and see how government colluded directly with Twitter to try to silence all sorts of people, and how they managed to, how the whole thing related to Trump went down, how they decided to kick Trump off Twitter, and just all these internal messages that were about all these different things. And then, of course, Musk has a number of tweets that he sent out that were controversial. Like he said at one point, my pronouns are prosecute/Fauci. And so the author, Walter Isaacson, calls this a conspiracy theory about Fauci being involved. Of course, if you talk to Rand Paul, then you might have a different story related to that. And I think a whole bunch of stuff has come out related to this that illuminated how not conspiratorial the consideration is. And then, of course, he has changed it since. Twitter is X, and he's going to be trying to add a whole bunch of new stuff to the functionality of it and make it kind of a one-stop shop social media experience. So that is mostly the book. I mean, obviously, there are a whole bunch of other things in there. I highly recommend, just to go into the analysis here, I highly recommend the book. I will be reading it again and probably a couple more times. I think Isaacson, in reading his Steve Jobs biography, it was actually really easy to read. There was so much in there. It was never boring. There was never a moment where I was just like, oh, do we have to talk about this? I just thoroughly enjoyed it from beginning to end, even though it was long, and even though the Steve Jobs biography was long. It could have been the subject matter of both books, but still, I just think Isaacson kind of really nails it when it comes to what to include, what not to include, how to talk about it, when to inject a different storyline, because you will just jump from SpaceX to Tesla to his family to Twitter, back and in and out of each of them, talk about his marriages, and then back to SpaceX. I mean, all those things were happening throughout the book, which kept it fresh as you were going through. And much of it's organized temporally, so they'll be like, oh, this is what happened during this section of time, which made it pretty easy to follow. And although he was clearly biased, as a kind of generic liberal who has been ensconced in traditional media, it doesn't color too much of the reporting. Especially when it comes to Twitter, that's where it comes out the most, but it doesn't affect too much of it. And he had an ability to hint at kind of the psychological depth without being too pedantic or overstating connections. So he'd hint at, okay, this aspect of Errol or this aspect of Amber Heard or whatever, psychologically, this is what this means. He'd hint at it, but he wouldn't go overboard and try to do some kind of a diagnosis. So, big picture-wise, Elon Musk is the great man theory incarnate. Tesla isn't as environmentally revolutionary as is pretended. We still have to mine lithium, and most of the electric chargers that are out there right now are running on things like coal and natural gas. SpaceX is like an adventure that's in the drapes of a company, which is awesome, super awesome. Too bad we can't do more of that, but hopefully it does very well. And there are certain things like providing satellite internet all over the world that are awesome. They're amazing, but the rockets are really where it's at. Being able to build reusable rockets is the baseline for being able to travel to and inhabit other planets. Neuralink is terrifying. Injecting people with tech to expand their ability to understand or how they think or whatever else is crazy talk, but they're working on it, and just around the corner, they're going to be getting the ability to do human trials, which is crazy. Twitter/X might save the world. It might have been one of the most important developments in human history. Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, and if he does nothing else for the rest of his life, it could be a big deal, especially now, because they didn't know at the time that this book was being written or when he purchased Twitter. But things like when it comes to what's going on in Israel and Palestine, the Gaza Strip and everything, what's going on there, we saw raw video of everything that was happening that could have easily been scrubbed for various reasons. And you saw this with the Twitter old guard. They would do this, like when it came to the Hunter Biden laptop. They would just find a reason to prevent it from being disseminated, and they could absolutely do that if it was against regime narrative, just for the sake of it. So in this case, we got to see a whole bunch of those videos. Now, there are a lot of reports now that some of those are being suppressed and some accounts that are sharing them are being removed. I hope that's not the case, but we'll see how it goes. Whatever else is going on, it's at least better than it was, and there are already many events occurring wherein it is much better to have at least a somewhat open Twitter X experience to be able to discuss these things, so it's much appreciated. The Boring Company is boring. They're boring holes into sub-LA and in Nevada, Las Vegas, to try to make traffic a little easier. We'll see if anything ever comes of that. OpenAI was swept from under him, and he founded X-AI, so we'll see where that goes. But overall, I really think it is a vindication of the idea that great men can do incredible things and change the course of history. So something to take to heart if you aspire to be one of those things. And otherwise, okay, that was the book. That was Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. And great book, like I said. I was able to, I don't know how, but I was able to condense this into a single episode. And we will do some more discussions at some point later. But otherwise, we are going to finish Metamorphosis. I know I saw some of the comments related to my reading style. And I thoroughly understand, I try to speed through all sorts of things, so that's just how I function. So we'll adjust and try to make it more fun, accessible. I just want people to read these books. I don't care what else is going on. I don't care what's going on with me. I just want more people to read the books. So whatever I can do to ensure that happens, that people get some of the complexity and the richness out of these things, then I will do that. I don't care if it takes a chicken costume or anything else, then that's what I'm going to do. But anyway, thank you very much for listening to this one, and I will see you on the next one. All right, bye.